The Chris Johnston Show.
Let's go!
Your number one destination for a behind-the-scenes look at the game of hockey.
Is this thing on?
Here's NHL insider Chris Johnston and host Julian McKenzie.
In the spirit of a holiday season, we have gifts to give out. Well, specifically, Chris does. We're going to give a gift to all 7 Canadian NHL teams. And I'm looking forward to this list that you've drawn up, CJ.
Yeah, hopefully CJ Claus has enough room in his sleigh to make everyone happy across the nation of Canada.
Oh, I'm sure he does. Let's start from west to east. Let's start with the Vancouver Canucks. What gift would you give them?
Well, this one takes up a massive amount of room in the sleigh because it's a very big concept, but it's peace and harmony. I wish nothing but peace and harmony to the Canucks because, let's face it, there's been so much talk as the team went into the holiday break about, who gets along and who doesn't get along. What's the status of the relationship with JT Miller, Elias Pettersson? It just feels like that's a market in particular. There's just a lot of consternation around the team. And really, when I look at the group, obviously this is a team that's going to, I think, be pretty active before the trade deadline in terms of, having the front office, try to give them a little bit more on the ice. But I think a little off-ice harmony would go a long way for the Canucks, because whether it's the fan base, the media, or perhaps even what's going on behind closed doors in the locker room, it just feels like there's not enough of it there.
I feel like you could give them peace and harmony like every year. And I'm not trying to take a shot at Canucks fans, but that's a wild market. And we appreciate how wild they could be as a market. But that's a perennial gift you could give them every single year. But you're right. It seems like there's always something to talk about with this team and some kind of drama. And I'm still kind of at a loss at the fact that Pettersson and Miller are at the center of it, if it is the case.
Well, it is the case that certainly, and it's been known for a long time and discussed a lot that they aren't best of friends. I think that we'd all agree. I think everyone would agree that's an adult that's had a job anywhere. I mean, the point is you don't have to be best friends with everyone you work with. That will never, ever be the case, no matter what your job, what your occupation, what have you. But, I think really what you need to have happen there is just to make sure that everyone has enough respect for each other, that they can, still bond around a common goal. And that's, obviously having as much success as they can in the season, trying to chase the Stanley Cup once they get to the playoffs. And I don't think there's anything to say that can happen, but it just feels like it keeps cropping up as an issue. And I don't know if, I don't know that anything's changed necessarily between those two, because as I say, I think this has been a pretty well established thing that they, they just see the world on different ways, wired different ways. I mean, JT Miller is a very competitive guy, very fiery guy, but I think, can, be abrasive perhaps if you take it the wrong way. Pettersson's maybe a little more mild mannered and withdrawn. And so, I just think if there could be some peace and harmony, some kumbaya, I mean, it is the spirit, right? It is that time of year where you kind of want to let bygones be bygones with whatever you're dealing with. And I feel like in Vancouver could go a long way because, I mean, the individual talents of those players speak for themselves. I mean, we have the recent example of last season where the Canucks had all kinds of success and, frankly, had a really great chance to get to at minimum the Western Conference final, lost game 6 and 7 to Edmonton in the second round, but still, had so much success was those two being two centerpiece players. And so, if they're going to do anything, I would think in the near future, it's going to involve both JT Miller and Elias Pettersson performing at a high level for the team. And so, I don't mean to make it just about them. I mean, maybe we could wish Thomas Drance, our colleague, and, a little bit more peace around him as well. And, just in general, it just feels like that there's always something to be raged about in Vancouver. And so I'm just trying to dial it back a degree or two and, give everyone at the holiday season a chance to be chill.
I'll extend that to Harman Dayal, who's also based out of Vancouver, too. I'll just ask one more Canucks question.
I was going to say Harman as well, but I feel like Harman is already pretty chill. I feel like Thomas is in the middle of the wars a little bit more, like for one reason or another. I mean, he because he always does, where he stands on an issue, right? Like he will not, he's unequivocal in it, but I just noticed Thomas is in the middle of the chaos a little bit more, whereas Harman rises above it.
He's just chill. He's like the coolest kid on the block. One more Vancouver question. do you still see them as a playoff team? Do you still see them kind of rising above all the chaos?
100% they're a playoff team for me. And as I say, I think, but just before the roster freeze kicked in before Christmas time, they were very active in trying to get a defenseman. I expect that to pick up here, as we get beyond the holidays and trades become a thing again in the league. And so I think that their playoff team is constituted. I think that they have a front office that's highly motivated to add to their roster. And so, as for how good they could be, I mean, so much of probably if you asked this for any team that we're about to talk about, I mean, the second half is so key, is so critical. I mean, look at Edmonton of last year, right? I mean, their second half fueled that run through the playoffs where they were definitely the best team in the league in the second half of the regular season and, got all the way to the Cup final, Game 7. So, I think it's all right there for Vancouver. It certainly don't have them today as a top tier contender, but, I think that they're very much in the mix. And, that's why if peace and harmony come into play, and now that Thatcher Demko's back, if he can stay healthy, I think that if they can get basically all the dynamics flowing in the right direction, this could be a real force to be reckoned with.
Let's move on to the Calgary Flames. What gift are you giving them?
I thought about a couple different things here. I think it's been a positive year in Calgary so far, more than what the outsiders are saying. I know internally there was a lot of belief, but I'm going to go a little off the board, and I'm going to give a little more goal scoring on the stick of Andrei Kuzmenko. And You might think that's kind of a weird gift, CJ. But, I mean, the guy has one goal. And you look 2 years ago, his first year in Vancouver, he had 39. Last year, there was a dip off, but he still finished with 22 between Vancouver and Calgary after the trade. And when I look at the Flames, I mean, if there's one thing that I think could hold them back to making the playoffs now, because they're right around the cutoff line, is, if they just don't have enough goals. And, he's a player to me that we've seen, there's proof of concept there. I mean, you've seen him score 60 goals plus over the last 2 seasons. If he can somehow regress in the positive direction in the second half, I think a couple extra goals off his stick could be the difference between the few points that is probably going to separate the Flames from either making it or not making it when this season's said and done. And so, I know the fans, I'm sure, want to see a playoff team in Calgary that, they've had Dustin Wolf come along. He's been a great present for them. He's not one I have to give to them because they already have him, and he's been tremendous through the first part of the season here. But, I think a few more goals from Kuzmenko could go a long way. And because when I look at the other players in the lineup, I mean, the other guys that aren't scoring a lot are kind of guys I don't expect to score a lot, but Kuzmenko has a very clear, he's got a great shot. I mean, he lacks other areas of the game, but what he can do in the right situation is put the puck in the net. And for whatever reason, it just hasn't happened so far this year.
I'm very intrigued at how you framed this gift, because you're right. There's it's this nice surprise that Calgary's in the spot that it's in. But I think of the fact that Andrei Kuzmenko is a pending UFA. And considering the fact that this team is in a retool, Andrei Kuzmenko could use some goals, but maybe not necessarily to help them get into the playoffs, but maybe to help his case as a guy the Flames could sell off to get some kind of assets at the trade deadline. Like, who knows if this Flames team could still make the playoffs? I think there's a faction of fans that would love to see it. Obviously, that you want to see the team win, but there's a lot of other people in this market base who don't want to see this team be in the mushy middle, and they would like to see them bottom out and try to get some higher quality draft picks. So if Andrei Kuzmenko plays well, and maybe the team continues to kind of flounder around and fall off a little bit at the trade deadline, you're not thinking, oh man, I hope you make the playoffs. It's, well, can we get a third or a fourth round pick for this guy? Can we get a prospect that can add to our prospect pool? I'm really intrigued at how you framed it with Andrei Kuzmenko, because I thought you would have gone the other direction. I think in my head, that's what I'm thinking.
Well, the goals will help either way. The goals either help your team make a push for the playoffs. They help Andrei Kuzmenko and his agent, his accountants, to do better on his next contract. And they could help the Calgary Flames if they choose to move on from him at the deadline, have him be, something that could be an asset to them at when it comes trade time in March 7th. So, I feel like if that happens one way or another, no matter which way the organization goes, no matter what he's thinking as an individual, I think everyone would be a little happier if he got some more pucks to cross the goal line there. And so, he also seems like a really fun-loving guy. So I just wish him a better second half of the season than the first half has been. And so that's my present to the Flames and to Kuzmenko.
You're also correct about the fun-loving part, because when he does score goals, he gets to talk to the media. And almost every time he talks to the media, something ridiculous just happens. I don't know how much of it you can actually print in your stories, but he's very much a fun-loving guy, and that does come across with the Calgary Flames. So I like that gift for them, and I like the gift for Vancouver. Let's move to the Edmonton Oilers. What are you gifting them?
Well, I'll call this the spirit of Boxing Day, but maybe 20% off defensemen. Because clearly the Oilers are shopping for a blue liner, specifically a right shot defenseman, or at least a player that can play on the right side capably, particularly in the top four. And, the one thing they don't have this year is a first round draft pick. They do have their second round pick in 2025. They've got the full complement in 2026. So there is some, they've got a little few weapons in the arsenal there, but like a lot of teams that have been trying to win for years and years and years, they've traded away that capital. And so, I think it's going to be a trade they have to make, but, not necessarily going to be an easy one. But to me, for a team that has rightfully its eyes set on getting back to the Stanley Cup final, the biggest hole in the lineup still is just a little bit of an imbalance on their blue line. They've gotten by with Troy Stetcher and Ty Emberson playing the right side, behind Evan Bouchard. But, I just think that they could use a little more depth there. And particularly someone, to slot in on that second pairing would be ideal. And so I don't know if I can just give them the defenseman, because I'm not sure who that player is right now that's going to solve the problem. That's for management to figure out. But maybe I'll just have the market be a little bit in their favor this year, and that's the gift I'm giving them.
What do you think of the Oilers as they entered the holiday break? We know at the beginning of the year there was a bit of a lull, but they've seemed to have caught fire in the last few weeks.
Yeah, to me, they've played like the contenders we all thought they would be entering the year. Especially they came through a stretch of games there where they're, played Tampa and Boston, Florida, Vegas, all right in a row, Minnesota, right, teams all in the top 10 in the NHL, and they won, 4 out of 5 of those games. Really, if you look at December as a whole, they've been really strong. And so, it's basically a slow start out of the gates. And, since early November, it just kind of kicked it into high gear. And I have no reason to believe they're not going to, have another kick at a long playoff run. I mean, it's hard to know how everything's going to unfold, but I'm certainly my thoughts about their chances are no worse now than before the season started. And pretty sure before the year I picked them as my Cup champion pick. So I'll stick with that. I mean, it's a bit of an open field this year. We're being totally honest, right across the league. I mean, there's some good teams, but there's not a ton of separation there. It's hard to say there's one team that's the favorite. I mean, you might like a Dallas, or, Vegas has had a really strong year. Maybe you believe what you're seeing in Washington or New Jersey. Tampa's actually been really, really strong the last little stretch. So maybe you think, but I mean, what I'm getting at is obviously a lot of those teams have been really good teams for a long time, but I just don't know that there's one to look at. And certainly I think Edmonton has every right to dream big and to believe that they can get back there, because Draisaitl's having an awesome season. McDavid's been himself, and, they got players up and down the lineup to feel good about. The biggest thing will be that fixing, I don't want to call it a hole, but it's a bit of a hole for a team with the kind of aspirations they have. I just think they need to round out that blue line, but they've known that since before the season started, and they're just waiting to get closer to the deadline when they have the cap space to make that kind of move.
Okay, let's move on to the Winnipeg Jets. What are you gifting them?
I want to gift them a bunch of full houses in the second half of the year. And I don't say this with any snark or anything. I mean, there's been a big improvement over in the last, since the calendar flipped to 2024. The Jets were at about 91% sellouts, of capacity rather, for this season. And that's up pretty significantly from where they were last year. So a lot of the efforts they've put towards that have they're showing incremental progress. I know it probably never, like anything, doesn't happen. You can't solve your problem in a day. It's maybe not happening as soon as they'd like, but I just think this team has been pretty entertaining. I think that they, again, could be one of these teams that goes on a run if things come together well, if Hellebuck is at his best, when the biggest games come around. And wouldn't it be great to see the building Ram there in Winnipeg? Just because it would make me feel good. It's always been one of my favorite buildings to go to, and I think the people of Winnipeg deserve good hockey to watch, and I think they're going to have that in the second half here. And so hopefully, as Santa made his rounds around Manitoba, that there was some Jets tickets and some stockings because I'd love to see that place jammed.
The Jets over the last few seasons have always at least tried to find ways to ice competitive teams. I always think of the moment when we did the show and we were surprised by the extensions for Connor Hellebuck and Mark Scheifele being announced at the same time. They're very much all in on being a competitive team. Is this the team that gets over the hump and gets to the Stanley Cup final? I know you're looking at Edmonton, but are they good enough to do that this year?
They could be. I think a lot of it hinges on the goalie. Their best player is the goaltender. It's not to say it's all on his shoulders. Obviously, a lot has to happen around Connor Hellebuck, but he could be a difference maker. And when you look back to last year's playoffs, it wasn't there for him. I know he's talked a lot about how he felt like process-wise, he performed well in that series, but obviously the numbers aren't kind to him. And it's maybe almost unfair. It's a little bit like Shesterkin maybe carrying the Rangers in some past years. But, Vasilevsky, frankly, with Tampa and some of their runs, was sort of the main difference maker. I mean, I think when you have that player, it's always there for you. I like their team. I don't think it's the deepest in the conference, but I mean, it's not the way hockey works. And so, I think there'll be another team that will be pretty aggressive leading into the deadline. That the Jets actually always are. If you look back, even last year, they made the trade for Sean Monahan, pretty well in advance of the deadline. We've seen it in other years and not been afraid to trade first round picks, for example, for expiring contracts in a season where they feel like they have a chance to make some noise. And, what's kind of compelling and maybe a little below the radar is the fact that Nikolai Ehlers is in his final year under contract to the Jets. And I'm not sure that there'll be an extension done there, kind of falls into the category of let's see where the things end up after the season. But, there's maybe a little bit more impetus to push some chips on the table and see if maybe there's a trade or two that can help get them over the top. But, certainly a very, very good team. And it's not quite lightning in a bottle you're trying to catch, but you're certainly trying to catch a good run of play at the right time. And it wouldn't surprise me at all to see them play, multiple rounds this spring.
Man, 2025, I feel like you could do an entire segment about the future of one Nikolai Ehlers. Talented player, but just the fact that there seems to be this indecision about his future in Winnipeg, I find that really fascinating. Yeah,
and to me, you keep him, though. You make I don't know how the discussion is going to go, but I just think because of what he's meant to the team and it's tough. Lots of teams face this decision. The Leafs, you could say, with Marner, Colorado with Rantanen. These teams that are trying to have success now, but maybe worried about losing a player for nothing if he walks away as a free agent. I mean, every organization has to kind of make a call there, but I think you want to give yourself the next best chance to win, and that's right now with Nikolai Ehlers on your roster. Come this year's playoffs.
I agree with you personally. We'll see how it plays out with him. Let's get to the Toronto Maple Leafs. What are you gifting them?
I mean, man, what do you get for your friend that has everything, right? Everything but a ring in a long time. But I will give the Maple Leafs, and specifically Anthony Stolarz, a successful pebble removal surgery from his knee. And
I like that.
The reason I do that is because, he's probably the best story in the first part of the season for the Leafs. Anthony Stolarz, came in with some questions about, how he'd handle a new team, how he'd handle playing more frequently, because he's been, really a career number 2 throughout his time in the NHL in a long career. And he's answered those pretty resoundingly with his play. And, I think one of the main reasons the Leafs sit where they do today in the standings is because of the play of their goaltenders. There's still so much runway left. There's a lot of games to be played between whether it's Matt Murray now on the scene, Joseph Woll, or Stolarz. But I think having a healthy Stolarz is critical for the Leafs to have some hope in the playoffs. And for all the reasons we can look back, and it's over a lot of years and different players, and we don't need to relitigate everything, I do think the one thing that stands out to me is very rarely in any of those playoff series have the Leafs had the best goaltending performance. And, Stolarz was starting to make you believe that either with him or with him and Woll, and I do believe the Leafs could be one of these rare teams that's pretty good that might go with two goalies at times in the playoffs, not just out of necessity, not because one guy stunk, but just because, it might be worth considering. I mean, we've seen the Bruins do this a little bit in the past where they were going between Allmark and Swayman, not because of wins and losses, just alternating starts. I think having a healthy Stolarz could be something good, could give the Leafs an element that they have has eluded them in past postseasons. So, I'd love to see him pick up where he left off. It sounds like he'll be back, at earliest late January, or mid to late January anyway. And so hopefully he has a restful Christmas holiday time, that surgery goes well, and he's back at his best for the Leafs.
Man, I feel like there's so many different gift opportunities for that team, whether it's something for Austin Matthews, Mitch Marner. John Tavares has had himself a good year. He could just get something as a reward. Like, I don't know.
Gifted him a contract, actually. That would have been a nice. Yes. That would have been a nice touch.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of possibilities with this team. The Toronto Maple Leafs, a team that no one ever talks about.
No, but I'm just saying with Tavares, he really wants to stay in Toronto, and he's had sort of one of these seasons. He knows the deal, right? Like one of the reasons he remained unsigned, it's not because I don't like him or anything like that, but at his age, as lots of teams have done over the years, including Boston with Patrice Bergeron and Pittsburgh with Evgeny Malkin and Chris Letang, and you can go down a long, long list of guys. But when you get to that age, teams, Claude Giroux had to play out his deal before he got that, obviously as a free agent came to Ottawa. But when you get to that certain age, teams are scared to give you the extension early because they're like, this could be the year you turn into dust. And, to John Tavares' credit, he's been far from turning into dust. Been one of their top performers early in the year, still scoring, actually at a better rate and point rate than he had last season. And so he's probably earned the contract on his performance, but this is business, man. And it could be, I don't know where it's going to go. I still think it's more than likely, if I had to say, that he remains a Leafs, but I'm sure he'd like to have that business done sooner rather than later. And would have been nice in his Christmas stocking, but Santa CJ forgot that one.
No, I think Santa CJ was spot on with the Anthony Stolarz pick. I don't think you're at fault for going that direction. Goaltending is everything, especially when it comes time for the playoffs. So I think he made the right decision. Don't hurt yourself for that. All right.
I feel like you should be giving out the gift for Ottawa because you spend so much time with the Senators. I mean, I know I'm throwing a curveball at you because you probably haven't thought about it, but I mean, you're close to that team. What do you think? Like, what would you be putting under the tree for them?
A first round pick. This is a team. Here's the thing, right? Like, they're going to have to give one up between this year or next. And look, they're going to, in all seriousness, like, I think as a joke, like, it makes sense to make as a joke, but in all seriousness, like, this is a franchise that they need to find a way to get themselves to the playoffs. Those prospects in their system, it's among the lowest prospect bases in the league, at least if you look at people like Scott Wheeler and how they rate them. Like, there's no one, I mean, beyond Carter Yakimchuk, like, who else is coming in that system? They need to restock that prospect pipeline as best as they can. And the fact that they're going to lose a first round pick either again this year or next year, that does not help them. I could understand why people in the market, particularly maybe in that front office, particularly in ownership, may be wondering if there is some generosity in the hearts of the NHL for them to give that first round pick back. But I also understand, too. I just think with the situation that they're in, them getting a first round pick would make a lot of sense. And I wonder, too, Siege, like, for a team like Ottawa that's trying to make the playoffs, they haven't made the playoffs in the last 7 years. At the deadline, if you're trying to shell out to get that piece that you think is going to get you over the top, if you know you're going to lose a first round pick either this year or next, like, I wonder how that makes you feel. And maybe, hey, you know what? Maybe that's something that's worth asking for me for Steve Staios next time I talk to him. How does that make you feel if you're the front office and you have to account for that, but you know this piece could put you over the top? Like, I wonder how that makes them feel.
I think you trade this year's pick and basically lock into the fact then that you're forfeiting the 2026 pick. And then you hope sometime between now and next year when we're doing the show, that it's been given back to you through the method you're kind of winking at there. Because, I just think you have to live in the moment for today. Now, there's still a lot of games to be played between now and March 7th, maybe. And I'm not wishing bad things. I mean, the Senators had such a great run right before Christmas time. They finished so hot, and that's probably the best gift of all, quite frankly, the one they earned themselves with all those victories in December. But, as long as they're in a position to me where they legit have a chance at the playoffs, I think that management should see that pick as one worth trading, because you can't put a price on actually getting back to the playoffs. It's for your fans. It's for your players, like these guys that have been there a lot of years now. I think it quiets down some of the nonsense that they don't want to, keep popping up. And I think it also signals that you're serious, right? And we know they're serious. They say they're serious, but it's an action item that shows you're serious. So to me, you're right. You wish you could give them that one back that they have to forfeit. But even if that doesn't come back to them, I just think you trade the 2025 first, get the best player or players you can, and take a real run at this spring.
Honorable mention goes to Brady Tkachuk, a tooth.
Oh man!
After that game against Calgary, he lost a tooth in the stitches. Okay, I like that for Ottawa. What about the Montreal Canadiens, the last team on the 7 teams list?
It's funny. I was thinking about this in a few ways too. Like, they got Patrick Laine back just before Christmas, and obviously he came back with all those goals in his stick. So that was a nice gift that Santa CJ didn't have to give out. I think I'm going to say a robust trade market, because to me, this is probably the last year the Canadiens will enter sort of a winter and be planning on sort of stripping away pieces. It could always still happen in the future seasons if things go awry, but this is probably the last year where we might call it part of the plan. And, I would say with the defensemen they have, I mean, David Savard is a rental, but maybe even Mike Matheson, who has one more year on his contract, and I think, could potentially get them a pretty good haul. They have a few expiring forwards, Christian Dvorak, Yoel Armia. I just feel like this is the last year for them to try to restock a little extra, because from here on out, we're going to be talking about them. I think what they should be doing with their first round pick and acquiring players and things like that, sort of where Ottawa is. So I'm going to gift the Habs a very robust trading period before the deadline. It's been a great season for trades, quite frankly, around the league. And, if it ends up being a market where the sellers do well, it's kind of, to me, it's the last year where the Habs plan on being a seller. So you might as well make hay while the sun's shining.
Man, I wonder, just with this year, I mean, I thought they'd be like a little bit better, but I'm not surprised that they're in the spot that they're in. Are they good enough for next year for them to consider themselves not a seller, especially with how that Atlantic division is? Like, a lot, like we've talked about on the show before, where like Buffalo, Ottawa, Detroit, they're trying to get into the playoff picture, and they're kind of in that middle, or maybe a little below in the case of the Sabres. And the teams that have been good for so long in that division are still good. So if you're Montreal and you're hoping to not be a seller, like, man, you got to hope some of those teams in front of you fall off next year.
Yeah, but I think there's reason to think they could fall off. I'm not saying they will, but it's not impossible. And I see Montreal as a team that's poised potentially to take a run at one of the big free agents if there's a free agent that makes sense. And like, it's hard to know that yet, but to me, they're one of the teams that can probably make it work financially. You have to sort of factor in a few assumptions here, but I do think that the Canadiens could be a free agent player. Obviously, they have more prospects that are going to come along. You're hoping there's more internal growth from the guys you have. Maybe some trades. I look, it's a fair question. I certainly am not saying they're going to be a playoff team next year, but next year there has to be the expectation that it could happen if everything goes right, that they make the playoffs. That is. So, the free passes end here. You might argue, and I'm sure the Habs would argue, they're not getting a free pass this season, because I know, they've faced a lot of, and I'm not saying it's unfair, but tough questions from the media, a little bit more unrest from the fan base. Because it gets tiring watching the same old thing, right? I mean, you can be patient for a little while, but eventually you want to be cheering for a winner. I think that they could get to a much more competitive spot though sooner than you think. The other thing we don't know about next season, and this could apply to any team around the league, but I think there's going to be more shakeup around the league. I think there's going to be more fairly big names traded. I don't necessarily mean in season this year, but before we get to the start of the 2025-26 season, there's obviously more cap space out there for everybody, with a cap that's going to jump at minimum 5%, but maybe as much as 10%. Before next season, depending on how those negotiations go. And so I just think it's going to be it's going to be a unique year next year. There's unique conditions to this offseason. And I think the Canadiens are well positioned to strike, in that environment. They've kind of locked up the players that you want to lock up, and then they have to make some big decisions. I mean, if they end up signing a big free agent, they better make sure it's the right player, the right contract, that it works, that it can, it's always nice, as we've seen from the Predators. It's great to spend a lot of money on July 1st. You don't always get what you think you're buying. But I do think that Montreal has an opportunity to make next season pretty special. But, in the shorter term, I'm just gifting them. Let's stockpile a few more goodies, because those goodies might even just be used for trades down the line, when they're in a more competitive window.
All right. Any other gifts you'd like to give? I know we've limited it really for the 7 Canadian teams, but just trying to see what else CJ Claus has up his sleeve before we wrap up.
Well, I guess I should give you a gift. It'd be rude if I was just handing them out across the country, not you. You might not view this as a gift, though. I mean, be careful before. But I was thinking kind of a cool gift for you, but admittedly would be a little bit for me, too, would be a Sens Leafs first round series. First of all, I just think it'd be cool.
I would love that so much.
Cool for you, your first season on the beat in Ottawa, to be part of, covering that team going back to the playoffs. If they were to go back to the playoffs, I mean, it speaks for itself how fun it would be to cover, a series like Toronto-Ottawa. The rivalry aspect, the travel is pretty sensible. We could be doing CJ shows live from wherever we are at any given moment, because we're going to be in the same place. We get to spend some time together personally and professionally.
Yeah.
I feel like that would be a pretty cool gift. I didn't know, you have the style down. I knew I couldn't get you a shirt or something like that. So
thank you. That means a lot for you to say that.
In lieu of that, I wanted to gift you a cool professional opportunity that would bring us together more in 2025. So that was where that gift came from.
That's so nice of you, man. I didn't think about a gift for you, but I'd probably just order some kind of massive box of Aero chocolate bars, because I know you love that so much. I mean, I feel like that's not the same level at all as gifting a first round series between the Sens and the Leafs and all the fun stuff that comes with it.
You will never send a good gift back, and that's a good gift.
But I do think that you're one of the best in our business, and you deserve the world. So at least if you take that offering as at least a step towards getting the world, I would like to think, I will have done my part to provide Christmas cheer towards you, because you do that every year with us when we do these Christmas episodes, trying to provide positivity and good vibes and stuff. So you deserve some of that on your own, my man. You're the best.
Thanks, buddy. And I hope you're having a good holiday. And it's fun to be doing the show with you. So I'm grateful for that.
Likewise, my man. And thank you to everybody who's been watching and listening to all of our episodes. Subscribe to the podcast and keep it locked here for more holiday content. Thanks so much for listening to us.
The Chris Johnston Show. Follow Chris on Twitter @ReporterChris and follow Julian @JKA McKenzie.
The Chris Johnston Show.